It was in Harmony that John the Baptist appeared to Joseph Smith and restored the Aaronic priesthood. It was there that the apostles Peter, James, and John appeared to restore the Melchizedek priesthood.
Hi, welcome back to Women in Priesthood. I'm Rachel. This is a place for faithful LDS women, young women and men to answer the prophet Russell M. Nelson's call for us to prayerfully study all we can about priesthood power. One of the earlier videos that I made is called What is the Priesthood? And I recommend that you watch that video first if you're new to this channel. This episode is going to clarify a lot of your confusion about the priesthood, because so much of what we see in the Melchizedek and Aaronic priesthood is the public priesthood that we see so often. The patriarchal priesthood is something that is more private and personal. It happens in the temple, it happens in the home, and it's not as overt. But women have 4 very specific powers, and in some situations, priesthood powers and priesthood authorities under the Melchizedek priesthood. The Melchizedek priesthood is something that President Russell M. Nelson has said is extremely relevant to women in the church.
It was in Harmony that John the Baptist appeared to Joseph Smith and restored the Aaronic priesthood. It was there that the apostles Peter, James, and John appeared to restore the Melchizedek priesthood. Everything that happened in Harmony has profound implications for your lives. The restoration of the priesthood, along with the Lord's counsel to Emma, can guide and bless each of you. How I yearn for you to understand that the restoration of the priesthood is just as relevant to you as a woman as it is to any man. Because the Melchizedek priesthood has been restored, both covenant-keeping women and men have access to all the spiritual blessings of the church.
So President Nelson said, how I yearn for you to understand that the priesthood is just as relevant for you as a woman as it is to any man. And his contemplations about the restoration of the Melchizedek priesthood on the banks of the Susquehanna River through Joseph Smith are what prompted that desire of his. And so I want to unpack this specific talk called Spiritual Treasures, which was given by President Russell M. Nelson. It's this talk in which he really issues a call to us as women to start understanding the larger concept of priesthood power in the LDS Church, but it's a little confusing. In the Melchizedek priesthood, which is the public church organization priesthood, you have the Melchizedek priesthood and the Aaronic priesthood. I, on a regular basis in the past, have said, okay, well, that's where men get the priesthood done. I don't need to pay attention. That's not actually true. As a woman, there are 4 very specific priesthood blessings and powers that you receive as a result of the restoration of the Melchizedek order of the priesthood in the church. Let's unpack those 4 priesthood powers. The 4 main priesthood powers that we as women have access to as a result of making covenants and keeping covenants are baptism by immersion, the gift of the Holy Ghost, priesthood authority to act in callings in our wards and stakes, and finally, the opportunity to partake of the sacrament each Sunday. With that comes other special priesthood powers and blessings. Let's do a quick review about the Melchizedek priesthood versus the patriarchal priesthood. The Melchizedek priesthood was restored through Joseph Smith on the banks of the Susquehanna River and was the kickoff event for him restoring the public church structure priesthood. This is a public priesthood that we see that orders church governments and organizations. And through this, you also see later Joseph Smith will, once the Kirtland Temple is built, will restore the eternal priesthood of the patriarchal priesthood. This patriarchal priesthood could only be restored once a temple was built, because things of the patriarchal priesthood are eternal in nature, so they could only be received while in the Lord's house. So just a reminder that we do have these 2 major categories. We have the Melchizedek priesthood, which is a public structure of the church. This is how you see most of our public life in the gospel you see the public structures of the priesthood exposed. But you also have the more personal and private, eternal patriarchal priesthood. Today we're just going to focus on the Melchizedek order of the priesthood, under which is the lesser priesthood of the Aaronic priesthood. Melchizedek priesthood's restoration through Joseph Smith allowed for all covenant-keeping women and men to make and receive their first essential saving ordinances for salvation. The first we learn in the Articles of Faith, which is baptism through immersion. The second is the receiving of the gift of the Holy Ghost. These are direct priesthood powers that come in response to us individually initiating a covenant with God. And so you can see more and more that priesthood power has almost nothing to do with gender. It has everything to do with whether or not you as an individual are willing to make and initiate a covenant with God. In this situation of baptism, the covenant you're making is to try to be one of God's people, to try and mourn with those that mourn, and struggle to be a believer and a liver of all Christ-like things. In response to this commitment that you've made to God, He grants you a greater degree of priesthood power. And this is to enable you to fulfill your covenant keeping and to be enhanced as a member of His community.
Every woman and every man who makes covenants with God and keeps those covenants, and who participates worthily in priesthood ordinances, has direct access to the power of God.
The third priesthood power that the restoration of the Melchizedek priesthood enables women to have is priesthood authority when they are set apart for a specific calling in a ward or stake. And President Dallin H. Oaks clarified this talk in 2018 in his talk on priesthood.
We're not accustomed to speaking of women having the authority of the priesthood in their church callings. But what other authority can it be? When a woman, young or old, is set apart to preach the gospel as a full-time missionary, she is given priesthood authority to perform a priesthood function.
One of the most significant things about this talk and about this clarification is the idea that it's one thing to have the priesthood in your covenant-keeping life, but it is a totally different thing to actually understand the priesthood power that you have and be developing an ability to call on it.
Sisters, it is our turn. We have a divine errand from the Lord, and our faithful, unique contributions are vital. President Spencer W. Kimball explained, "To be a righteous woman during the winding up scenes on this earth before the second coming of our Savior is an especially noble calling. The righteous woman's strength and influence today can be tenfold what it might be in more tranquil times." Close quote. President Nelson has likewise implored, "I plead with my sisters of the church to step forward. Take your rightful and needful place in your home, in your community, and in the kingdom of God, more than you ever have before." Close quote.
When you are set apart to serve in a calling under the direction of one who holds priesthood keys, such as your bishop or stake president, you are given priesthood authority to function in that calling.
We have a generation now of young women who are going on missions, who understand that they have been called by the authority of the priesthood of God to serve missions, to preach the gospel. We have a generation of ward young women's presidents, ward primary presidents, ward relief society presidents who know that as they have been set apart by the bishop of that ward or the stake president of that stake, that they operate with priesthood authority to make promises to the women and the children that they are stewards for. One of the most exciting aspects, I think, about studying priesthood power is coming to understand it as a gift of the Spirit, understand how it applies directly to your personal life or to the people for whom you're trying to serve. And that is one reason why it is so important not only to study the doctrine, but to partner with the Spirit as you seek to understand this doctrine.
This process is neither quick nor easy, but it is spiritually invigorating. What could possibly be more exciting than to labor with the Spirit to understand God's power, priesthood power?
As you study priesthood power, you come to understand that God grants you his power. And once again, priesthood power does not belong to an individual. It's God's power that he shares with those of us on earth who are willing to make covenants or accept callings. And so the first 3 points that I've made thus far have been priesthood power is granted to us as women when we initiate covenants such as baptism or endowment, and when we accept callings in the stake or ward. We are granted a degree of enhanced priesthood power and authority in the situation of callings to act in God's name and to carry out his work of saving souls and teaching the gospel to the children or the young women or the women of our ward or stake that we have a priesthood stewardship for. I will say that as a young women's president in my ward, what a difference it made to receive a calling after 2019, because in the past I've had callings where I have been set apart by the laying on of hands by my bishop. I've had callings in the past, but I didn't know that I had priesthood authority to operate in those callings. And now I know that God has not only called me to this very difficult task of being a young women's president, but he's granting me priesthood authority and divine help to enhance me in my normal spiritual abilities to be an even better steward to these young women that I have a responsibility for. And this obviously directly applies to any time that you are set apart for any calling in your ward or stake. You have priesthood authority in that calling. It gets a little tricky whether you do not have keys. The key holder is still going to be either your bishop or your stake president, but as young women's president, relief study president, or primary president, you now become the presiding authority over the auxiliary for which you have been called, granted to you by the bishop's key holding priesthood authority. I hope that makes sense. I am going to make another video on priesthood keys and how that relates to us directly as women.
When you are set apart to serve in a calling under the direction of one who holds priesthood keys, such as your bishop or stake president, you are given priesthood authority to function in that calling.
The final priesthood power that we are able to receive as women comes as a direct result of recommitting to our baptismal covenants by taking the sacrament every Sunday. This is the lesser priesthood, or the preparatory priesthood. So at the time, this was the Aaronic priesthood that was restored. And in section 27, he's given detailed instruction as to how to administer the sacrament to the covenant-keeping community, so that everyone who partakes of the sacrament is allowed to reinitiate the blessings of their priesthood, of this priesthood covenant that they've made. And President Bednar gives a wonderful talk that clarifies the significance of this priesthood ordinance in our lives.
All saving ordinances and the ordinance of the sacrament must be authorized by one who holds the requisite priesthood keys. The ordinances of salvation and exaltation administered in the Lord's restored church are far more than rituals or symbolic performances. Rather, they constitute authorized channels through which the blessings and powers of heaven can flow into our individual lives. And this greater priesthood administereth the gospel, and holdeth the key of the mysteries of the kingdom, even the key of the knowledge of God. Therefore, in the ordinances thereof, the power of godliness is manifest. And without the ordinances thereof and the authority of the priesthood, the power of godliness is not manifest unto men in the flesh.
It's important to recognize that even though Aaronic priesthood holders have been given the stewardship and responsibility to administer the priesthood, to administer the sacrament, to pass it, they still have to partake of the sacrament themselves individually. So every individual person who partakes of the sacrament worthily receives a new infusion of priesthood power in their lives.
My personal admission today is that as a woman, I didn't realize earlier in my life that I had access through my covenants to the power of the priesthood.
And this is not a small thing, because one of the main things that it enables you to experience, other than the blessings and gift of the atonement and repentance, are the ministering of angels as your companions. As women, in the home, in the public, in the work place, we need the ministering of angels constantly to inspire our minds, to grant us revelation, to help us to be discerning for our relationships and our decisions in our lives. This is one of the most significant things that President Russell M. Nelson is calling on us to do, which is develop a spiritual capacity towards revelation in our lives, and that is a priesthood power.
Elder Ballard also taught, our Heavenly Father is generous with His power. All men and women have access to this power for help in their own lives. All who have made sacred covenants with the Lord and who honor those covenants are eligible to receive personal revelation, to be blessed by the ministering of angels, and to commune with God.
I wanted to close with my testimony to you, to testify of the truths of the doctrine of the priesthood, and recognize that women have access to priesthood power, and in many situations priesthood authority, that's been granted to us by God as a result of our covenant making and keeping, and He grants it to us out of a desire to empower and enable and magnify us in bringing about His work and His glory. And I hope that you'll make personal prayer a part of your efforts to study these things out for yourself. If you found these things helpful, I would so appreciate you subscribing below and hitting the bell so that every time that I actually get my act together and upload a new video, you'll get a notification. Also join us on Instagram at Women in Priesthood and leave your comments below on things that you found helpful.